Hey guys, what's up? Let's talk a little bit about slow motion of the A7 III against the 1DX Mark II. My name is Damien Cooper and welcome to Monkey Pixels.
We've got some fresh new young talent doing some things that I know you haven't heard before.
1, 2, 3, listen.
So if you're following this channel, you know that we travel a lot and we want to travel even more. And having all this big equipment sometimes really is a hassle, and you know, I really love Canon, I love their colors, I love their technology, but I'm really fed up with all their, incapabilities of bringing out new innovative stuff. So of course, as most others, I'm always looking towards Sony, at least with one eye most of the time, to see what they're innovating, and I'm really impressed by it. So it really hasn't been enough for us to make the switch, especially because we're shooting on the C200 most of the time, and I think this camera is totally unmatched by anything else. But when the A7 III came out, we were really looking at it, and this camera sounds amazing. So in the beginning it was sold out everywhere, so we couldn't really get our hands on it. But now that the hype actually, slowed down a little, we were lucky enough to get our hands on the camera to test it out a little. Because for a lot of travel videos like the one linked up here, we usually utilize just the 100 or 120 frames a lot of the times to get these, travel feels, slow motion, dreamy video looks. And so far, whichever camera we have used, the 1DX is completely unmatched when it comes to 120 frames. It's so buttery smooth and we just love it. With its 350 megabit data rate, I've yet to see anything better than that. But again, looking at the A7 III and all its specs, we were actually looking to maybe making the switch just for a travel camera. So we rented it out, we tested it a little bit, we only had it for a day, so we only shot a little cinematic sequence with it and compared the two side by side to each other. So what we did is, every shot we did with the exact same settings, with the same equivalent lens on both cameras, and then cut together the same sequence to just literally compare them side by side. So I will display both right next to each other right now. So let's look at both scenes. We're starting with the A7 III and then the 1DX, and you tell me which one you like best in the comments afterwards. Let's go. So first off, after actually editing and watching both side by side, I was really impressed because I really did like the A7 III footage. And I didn't think it would come that close afterwards. So first thing I noticed, and that isn't necessarily only true for the slow motion capabilities, but the Colorscience has improved a lot. We've owned several Sony cameras in the past and we really didn't like the colors. It always had this yellowish greenish tint to it that I just didn't like. I mean, a lot of people say that Canon is more on the magenta side, but if I had to choose magenta over green, I always take magenta any day of the week. So that has definitely improved, and with a little bit of color correction I could actually get kind of the look that I was used to by Canon, and even though they still looked a little bit different, most of the time I couldn't really tell which one I liked better. They were just different. So one big difference that you notice, and that is totally obvious, is the sharpness. With Canon, it's just not there. The 120 frames is really soft on the Canon, whereas with the A7 III, it's crystal clear and sharp. But then again, I'm not 100% sure if I really like that. I think a mixture between the two of them is probably what I like most. So I added a little bit of sharpening to the 1DX footage, whereas I would actually like to take away a little bit of the A7 III's. So when it comes to high slow motion, as I already said, that we're looking to create these dreamy travel videos where you don't need to have everything sharp. On the other hand, if you're shooting an athlete, for example, and we need to slow down the footage, I'd rather want to have everything sharp. But then again, this one is primarily used for our travel cameras, and we wouldn't really use it for any production jobs. So I'm probably giving the point towards the Canon, although it's really soft, but I like that dreamy look sometimes. So, and there's another thing that I always loved about Canon and hated about everything else. And I can't really explain it too well, but it's that 3D kind of feel. The image just looks and feels richer. And I'm not talking about the colors, I'm talking about the depth. It's just, it's not as flat, it's just rounder. I don't really know how to explain it, but you might actually know the feeling. So another thing, and that again isn't really just true for the 120, but in this one shot I tried racking the focus smoothly from Belle's head to the street. And the Canon's of rack focusing when touch focusing is so buttery smooth that it matches the 120 frames perfectly. But the A7 III I didn't really like at all. It was really abrupt and you could see the jittery. So if you're focusing or if you want to pull focus on the A7 III, although the autofocus in general is really good, I really didn't like how it racked focus, so I would suggest doing that manually. Speaking of autofocus, the autofocus on the A7 III is really good. It really improved. It's still not 100% up to Canon dual pixel standards, I think, but it came as close as I've ever seen on any other camera. The only thing that I noticed is when shooting in 100 or 120 frames, you lose the autofocus when it comes to face detection. You have a good autofocus, but there's no face detection, whereas on the Canon, you have regular tracking modes as well as the face detection. So that's one thing to notice. Speaking of the colors, for everyone wondering, we shot everything in a Cine 4 profile with a cinema color space. I haven't really used Sony cameras in a while, so that's what I kind of remembered. But when it comes to the color space, you can probably choose between 6 or 7 different options, and I don't know which one is perfect. This one was actually really leaning towards the magenta pink side, which is really unusual for Sony. It didn't really bother me too much because I could just, subtract it in post while doing the color grades, but you probably have better choices when using another color space. So when you're talking about really high slow motion, you also have to talk about low light capabilities, because if you're shooting high frame rates, you also need to increase your shutter speed. So with that, there's less light hitting your sensors, so you need to increase the ISO. So when it came to that, we were shooting at ISO 4000. For some reason, I underexposed the footage, which on both cameras, which was really surprising because looking at the monitor, it actually looked fine on both cameras. But then coming back to the computer, it really was 1 or 2 stops underexposed, so I had to actually bring the light up. And in that scenario, both cameras started to create a lot of noise. Again, because I underexposed the footage, that might actually be unfair for the A7 III, because it's probably doing a better job if you actually overexpose or expose right than the Canon 1DX. But since we're just using neat video most of the times for our really extreme low light shots anyway, I think most of the footage that we're shooting on the 1DX is totally usable after using neat video. So the low light capabilities are probably really good, but since we're not event shooters, we don't really care for it too much. So what's my verdict here when it comes to the slow motion? I think overall I still like the Canon image better than the one on the A7 III, and that probably comes down to bit rates, because if you're shooting such high frame rates, you need a lot of bit rates to actually compensate for quality loss. And The Sony just doesn't have it. The Sony's maximum is 100 megabits internally that you can record on the camera, although I was really impressed about the quality. And it came really close. And honestly, if it's just about the slow motion on this camera, I probably wouldn't even say that I have to go to Canon because it's that much better. Yes, I still think it's better, but I don't think it's that much better. The reason we're not switching as of yet is because we just love our cinema camera, and the A7 III just isn't good enough yet for us to make the switch. We also utilize the 4K 60 of the 1DX a lot, which is also slow motion that the A7 III isn't capable of. But maybe when there's another camera coming out like the A7S III or an A9S or whatever is coming out next, our minds change and we do the same test again, and maybe that will be the time we actually switch from Canon. I hope you liked that little comparison, and let me know if that would be reason enough for you to switch, because it's really intriguing to have a way smaller body to carry around with you and to go on shoots, because even the battery charger alone is as big as the A7 III from the Canon 1DX, which is ridiculous. So that is one thing that we really like about the Sony, but since the Sony and the Canon colors really don't match at all, it's really a hard time. We couldn't use the Sony as a B cam for our Canon setup, and just buying a separate complete Sony setup with lenses and camera and everything is just too expensive for what it's actually for. So I hope you liked this video. Please give it a thumbs up because that actually helps our channel grow, and maybe subscribe to our YouTube channel for more of these comparisons, and I'll see you on the next one.